Today here we have a Bulova Sea King, and as you can see it's not running. We have yet to figure out why it's not running. We give it a little bit of a whine. I think it's fully wound already, but just to show that it's still not going to run here. To start, I'm gonna take off the band, and the owner of the watch wants to reuse the band, so we'll keep that and clean it up. This is actually my uncle's watch. He wanted it running again. You can see how dirty this is. I think he had picked it up at a yard sale. This style case is called a compressor style, where this metal ring holds down the case back, and when the watch is underwater, the water pressure will press against the case back and the crystal and seal the watch up further. Case back was still stuck in place. There are no watchmakers service marks in there, so perhaps this has never even been serviced. You can see the automatic works are winding the watch, but it's still not running. The balance staff seems to be okay. I was trying to give a little bit of pressure on the barrel to see if it would start moving. With a puff of air, you can see the balance wheel spins freely. And then I was going to flip it over and see if it was moving the hands, and it still wasn't ticking. So to me, that means it's gummed up and there's no power getting through the train of wheels to the balance. So it's this gasket has been on here for so long that it's stuck to the movement ring in there. It's quite dirty also. And usually these watches have clamps that hold it to the movement ring, but this one fits pretty snug. Maybe that's why they don't have those clamps there. So I'm going to first take off the automatic winding rotor and get that out of the way. Now, even when you take that clamp, that little retaining clamp off of that rotor, it still comes off there pretty hard. You have to pry at it gently for a while before it comes off. Now I'll take the stem out so I can remove the movement from the watch case. we'll take that retaining or that movement ring off. And I'm putting the stem back in so that I can align the hands for removal. It's better to align them so you can remove them safely. I put a little piece of plastic over the dial to protect it when I remove the hands. Now I'll put those hands in this dial box for safekeeping. And I decided I didn't want to try to take that minute hand off of there. With the tweezers, more of a chance of scratching the dial. Now I'll loosen the dial foot screws. And the dial comes off. And there's also a plastic ring that is a spacer ring that comes off with it. And I put the dial in the dial box along with that plastic spacer ring. I'm going to start with the back side of the watch. And I'm going to start by taking off the balance for safekeeping. There's a little gap underneath the balance that you can pry to pop it loose. And now I'm going to start with the automatic winding works. Take that off. It looks like there's a little bit of magnetism either in the screwdriver or the screw. Perhaps the screwdriver. Alright, now that plate can come off, or bridge. I'm not sure what you would call these wheels. They do come apart like that. You have to be sure you put them back together right. You can see the dirt underneath those, especially this wheel here. You can see all the dirt around those. Perhaps not dirt, but old oil or lubrication or something. This is a little bit different click setup than I've seen. And this click spring is a little different also. You gotta be careful taking those click springs out, they can fly away. Now I'm going to take the pallet fork out so we can free up the train of wheels. You have to be careful getting the pallet bridge off. If you pry it too wrong, or not right anyways, you can break the pivots on the pallet fork. So you have to be careful how you take that off. And then the pallet fork can come out. And I'm just looking at the pivots on there to make sure they're intact. And now the train of wheels bridge can come off. And this screw here is only for that spot. The other ones are different. So when I go to reassemble, I have to remember that. You can see how it's shaped differently than these other ones. That out of the way, I can take out the train of wheels. That one you can see it has a gear that goes underneath the barrel. So when I go to reinstall that, I have to remember that. And lastly, the escape wheel can come out. The escape wheel is another one of those that you have to be careful with, because the pivots on those are pretty small. Now these little spring things here, I think I'm just going to leave those in place. They don't seem like they're necessary to take off. Now I'm going to take off the barrel bridge and the barrel. And the barrel seems to be stuck into it. Just another sign of how gummed up this watch is. Now I can take out the sliding clutch and the winding pinion. Now over to the dial side, this day wheel just pops right off. There's no retaining clip or anything. You just have to pull it straight up. I'm going to put the day and date wheels in this box to keep them safe. It's a little membrane box. Now this brass cover plate has 3 small screws on it. You can see there's a spring that's stuck in there. I thought it was permanently installed there, but it is not. So just be aware of that. It may pop out of there if you're not careful. That's where the day corrector spring or jumper spring goes. We'll get that out. I'm not sure what this star wheel is called. The hour wheel can come off. Now we have this plate that holds the date ring on. These screws are fairly small, but be careful not to send them flying or strip them out. Now with that plate off, there's a spring that for the date jumper. You have to be careful not to lose that. Then the date jumper itself can come out. Then the day ring. And that can go into the membrane box also. Now we have this plate that covers these intermediate wheels and the cannon pinion. And that wheel does pop off of there if you're not careful. And that cannon pinion just slides right off. It's not friction fit like some of them. And that spring, I tried to take it out of there, but I think it stays in there, so we'll leave that in place. And these intermediate wheels can come out, and I think those are beveled. So you have to look and see which side the bevel is on and make sure you put it back in the right way. If you don't, it won't wind properly. Here's a close-up view of one of those wheels. You can see there's a bevel on the bottom side, so you have to put it in so the bevel is facing down. Now we can get this plate off of there. Forget what that's called. There's a spring underneath there, so we have to be careful with that also. The yoke spring, so we'll carefully take that out. And then the yoke can come out. And finally, we need to take the stem retaining screw and little plate off. And there's the plate. And then the stem retaining screw can come out. Now I'm just looking over the jewels and making sure none of them are broken. And I'm going to put the balance back on for safekeeping before I move on to the cleaning. And I'm going to take the mainspring out of the barrel so we can clean that also. The winding arbor can come out, and now we're going to carefully take this mainspring out and paying attention to which way that mainspring winds in the barrel. So when we go to reinstall it, we know how it's supposed to be. If I just rotate the barrel in my fingers, the spring will slowly wind out while being retained by the tweezers. Then when it sits out a little ways, I can step it out the remainder of the way, just letting it wind itself out. You have to do this slowly, otherwise it'll hit everything and get all tangled up. Alright, there's the mainspring and the barrel, and they seem to be in pretty good shape, so I'll try to reuse those. And now this crystal has a few scratches, so we'll take that off and try to refinish that. And it should just pop right out, as it did. And then looking at this stem and crown, you can see that it's crooked. So I don't think this crown was original to the watch. Even though it says Bulova on it, it doesn't seem like it's the right crown. And the stem looks a little crooked also, but it could just be dirty. Here's all the parts, ready for cleaning and reassembly. While those parts go into the cleaner and we prepare for reassembly, I'd like to read you something that a company called Wasan Watches posted on X. It's called On Sin and Missing the Mark. Lately, I've seen a number of videos where prominent individuals point out that both the Greek and Hebrew words for sin have their roots in terms that mean missing the mark in reference to archery. This point is then massaged to lead us to the conclusion that maybe sin isn't that bad after all. It's very easy to miss a bullseye in archery. You're trying to hit the target, but it's a long way off. The bullseye is very small. There are so many variables. There's wind. Maybe you're tired. Maybe your eyesight is getting weak. What if your fingers slip? You're doing your best, right? And you're only missing by 1/10, maybe 1/100th of a degree. You'll get it next time. Keep your chin up. How comforting. But the truth about sin is not comfortable. I do think it's interesting that words for sin in both Hebrew and Greek share this particular etymological meaning. However, as with many other biblical concepts, the very best way to interpret the Bible is, and don't miss this, with the Bible. When we use something outside the Bible like entomology to build our understanding of a concept that is utterly contrary to what the Bible says, all we are doing is falling for the oldest lie in history. Did God really say? Literally, in Genesis chapter 3, before Eve eats the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the first words out of the serpent's mouth were, Did God actually say, "You shall not eat of any tree in the garden"? In this case, the serpent engaged in a particularly effective, layered act of deception. He didn't ask if God really said something that he actually said. He asked if God said something else. He moved the goalpost to a more extreme statement. It's the first use of reductio ad absurdum. Eve finds herself explaining that God didn't say all trees, just this one, but the serpent's words were already working. They're already sowing doubt. He's ready with a follow-up lie, and from there it just snowballs. The first sin, the original sin, was the eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Satan's first lie was effectively convincing Eve, and by proxy Adam, that it simply was not that big a deal, even though God had commanded them not to do it, and had even explained that the consequences were death. The casual reader may notice that on the day they ate of the tree, they did not die, no, not physically, but they did die spiritually. They were immediately cut off from God. The fact that God did not strike them down physically was a profound act of mercy on his part. This incident is not an outlier. It's not abnormal. It's the beginning of a clear pattern in which the Bible explains to us over and over again that sin is absolutely evil, that its consequences are dire, and that we should avoid it at all costs. Consider the following passages. Isaiah chapter 59, verse 2. But your iniquities have separated you from your God. Your sins have hidden his face from you, so that he will not hear. Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 13. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Numbers chapter 32, verse 23. But if you fail to do this, you will be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 8. Whoever sows injustice reaps calamity, and the rod they wield in fury will be broken. Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 20. The soul who sins shall die. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexual immoral person sins against his own body. Romans chapter 3, verse 23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 6:23. For the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. No, sin is not a small thing. It is an act of active rebellion against the perfect, almighty, holy God of the universe who made us, and who has all authority. It's evil not in a small, cute way, but in a horrific and disgusting way. Its consequences are dire. It literally separates us from God in an eternal sense, dooming us to eternal suffering in hell. Sin is not to be trifled with. As comforting as it may sound to emphasize the missing the mark meaning of the word, it's a comfort that will drag you straight to hell. Reject this comfort. So what's the answer? All of us have sinned. All of us will sin. If sin is deadly and its consequences are eternal hell, what can any of us do? There's good news. There's really, really, really good, great news. The gap between us and God is eternal. It's infinite. It's not something that can be bridged by any of us, by our works, by our worship, or by any amount of sacrifice we bring. An eternal, infinite gap requires an eternal, infinite bridge. Jesus Christ is that bridge. He is God and man, and he lived a life of difficulty and perfection amongst us. He humbled himself, he who was worthy of all praise, glory, and exaltation. The good he did was repaid with evil. He was falsely accused, whipped, repudiated, and executed, through execution on a cross. Throughout the entire ordeal he had the power to stop it, to ascend into heaven, and to leave his enemies in smoldering ruin. Such an act would not only have been acceptable or understandable, it would have been right, it would have been just. But that's not what Jesus did. He stayed on the cross, and he let them kill him, and some of his last words were, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Sit with those words for a minute. Let them roll around in your head. Marinate on them. Meditate on them. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They were sinfully and prejudicially executing the God of the universe, the greatest sin imaginable, and Jesus forgave them. He offers his forgiveness to you, to me, to everyone who will believe in him. recognize who God is. It's important that we talk about sin, because without understanding sin, how can we really understand the depth of our depravity and the degree of our separation from God? It's essential. But when we talk about sin and its consequences, it's easy to begin to think of God as solely a God of justice and wrath and harsh judgment. God is a God of justice and wrath. He describes himself many times as a jealous God. He wants and deserves our worship, devotion, faith, loyalty, and love. The Bible commands us to fear the Lord many times. To underestimate God's power, holiness, and the degree to which we should respect and fear him is a grave mistake. Yet God is not limited to these things. Amazingly, this God of justice and wrath is also a God of mercy, grace, love, and forgiveness. He's a God who deserves not only our fear, but our perfect obedience. And yet, when we fail, he sends his own Son to pay the price for our failure, for our sin. As Romans chapter 5 verse 8 says, "But God shows his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." I think there are about 3 ways you can respond to this. Number 1, foolish dismissal. Some are confronted with this truth and simply brush it off. It didn't happen. There is no God, no sin, and no one died for my sin. No further thought or consideration is given, and that's it. They go on their merry way. Number 2, self-righteous indignation. Some will accept, at least in part, that there may be a God, that there is such a thing as sin, and that this God did send his Son to die for us. But the response is to minimize the evil of sin, and to accuse God of being overly harsh, overly judgmental, overly mean for his response to our sin. Furthermore, they accuse God of cruelty and downright maliciousness for sending his own Son to die for our sins. The result is a callous, angry rejection of God and his mercy. Number 3, acceptance. The best response is recognizing that there is an almighty God of the universe, that he did make us, and he exercises all authority over us, and he is due all worship, glory, praise, and obedience, and that we have sinned against him, and that his gift of mercy is something we do not deserve at all, but it's something for which we are incredibly grateful. The best response is belief. Whether you believe in Jesus or not, I hope this has been a helpful read. If you do not believe in Jesus, I hope that these words will point you in the right direction, that you will seek God, that you will come to know him, and that you will attain eternal salvation from God by grace through faith in his Son, Jesus. Don't miss the mark. Soli Deo Gloria. Alright, first we're going to start with the mainspring and attempt to wind that back into the barrel. I'm going to use this K&D style winder. It is a bit small for the barrel, and we'll see how this goes. And you want to be careful whenever you get to about this stage where the tail starts to come into play, and you want to try to get it to go in there without messing anything up. And that's where I ended up with a problem here. I was trying to use the tweezers to get this end started, but I think the winder was just too small for this size, and I ended up breaking off the end of it. So I had to order a new mainspring, and I could not find one specifically for this watch. So I found one that was almost exactly the same size, Whether or not it will be sufficient, I guess we'll find out. So now I'm starting to put the train of wheels back in. And the technical bulletin for this movement from Bulova shows putting a little bit of oil right where I put it there. They don't specify what type of oil, so I just took an educated guess and put either D5 or 9010 there. And I don't remember if the technical bulletin said to put oil there, but typically there is some oil in that spot. So I did put some there, and that again was 9010. And now we can reintroduce the bridge, and the bulletin does say to oil the bottom side where the seconds hand pinion goes, because once you put it on, it's hard to get to oil. So oiling it from underneath is easier. And now you have to line up all the pinions on these wheels and get them to go into the jewels. You have to be careful not to break any of them. And it didn't immediately just fall into place. I had to play with it for a while and finally had to zoom in really close on the microscope and find them all and get them all into the jewels. I believe I got everything in. Now we'll get the screws on the bridge. Remembering this is the different screw, so we have to make sure to put that one back in that spot. I'm trying to be very careful not to slip. Oh, and I did forget here, that's why I'm taking the screw back out, that the stem retaining screw needs to be put in. So before I continued, I needed to put that in. So I have to repeat the process of when first I put oil there and then put the screw in, and then I have to repeat the process of getting that bridge back on. It's something I do a lot, is forget that stem retaining screw. After getting those all back into place, we can get these bridge screws put back in. Alright, so that new mainspring came in, and this one was actually for, I'm actually putting some braking grease on the walls of the barrel, because for an automatic watch, the mainspring has to be able to slide around the edges. So here's the new mainspring. It was actually for an international watch company watch, but it's almost identical to the one that I broke. And when you put these back in, you have to make sure it's wound in the same direction as the one you took out. And when they're in these little aluminum rings, you can just push them right into the barrel carefully. Most of the time, you can have the colored side. You can see it's blue on that ring. If you have the colored side up, that is typically how it goes in, but you have to make sure, because sometimes it's not. It just depends on the watch. Alright, now I'm going to add a little bit of oil to the mainspring itself. This probably isn't necessary, as they come with a little bit of oil on them, but I figured it wouldn't hurt anything to add some 8200 mainspring oil to the spring itself. Now I'll get the barrel arbor put back in. And when you're doing this, it's a good idea to take pictures of each step that you do, so you know exactly how to put things back together. And that's especially true with the way the mainspring is wound into the barrel, and whether or not the barrel arbor goes one way or the other. And then we'll snap it closed with this little tool. And now I can oil where the barrel goes and get that installed. I believe that was D5 on that bushing there. Now I can get the barrel bridge on. And I'm putting some more D5 on the barrel arbor. And we can reintroduce the screws. Adding a bit more oil into the bushing, and now I can oil all the rest of the jewels on this top side, because as you assemble this watch, they get covered up, so you have to be sure to oil them beforehand. My hand kind of makes the camera go out of focus. Now I'll get the click put back in. And now I need to reinstall the click spring. I like to cover it with plastic just in case I mess up a little bit and the spring goes flying. I've lost them before, and it starts to add up when you have to keep buying springs. Alright, with that spring in, we can now put the ratchet wheel on. And I found out as I was trying to tighten this up that the click is not engaging as well as it should. So I took that screw back off and have to adjust that spring to make it engage a little bit better. So I bent it a little bit to make it more strong. And now I'm reinstalling that. Not sure why I'm not using plastic here. Maybe I just got overconfident. Nothing bad happens, but usually I use plastic instead of something else. Now I can put the ratchet wheel back on and test it again. You can see now that the wheel doesn't want to go down because the ratchet or the click is getting in the way, so the spring is already working better. So now when I screw this down, when you spin that barrel, the click holds it back. So now I'll hold that wheel in place and then screw it down a little bit tighter. Now I can put the pallet fork back in. And you have to be really careful with the pallet fork because it is very delicate. I have replaced a pallet fork pinion staff before, but it's so small it's very hard to work with. You want to make sure that those pallet fork pinions are in those holes before you push that bridge down. Now I can put the screw on that. Sorry for the out of focus there. And here I'm adding a little bit of wine to the watch to see if we can get it to run once we reinstall the balance. You can see the pallet fork, it should click back and forth to show that the power is going through the train of wheels properly. And before I install that balance, I'm going to oil the pallet jewels, because you want a little bit of this 9415 grease on each one of those escape wheel teeth. So you put a tiny drop of oil on that pallet exit jewel and you let 5 teeth go through that oil, and then you do it again, and you do it 3 times so that each tooth of the escape wheel gets a bit of grease on it. Now I had taken these jewels off the balance for cleaning, and now I'm going to reinstall those. I didn't show that. So one side of the jewel is curved and the other side is flat. You want to put a bit of oil 9010 on the flat side of the jewel. And then you take the chaton, which is the other side, and place it upside down over that jewel. And the capillary action will hold that in place. So then when we flip it over, we can just reinstall it directly into the watch. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to use a bit of Rodico to hold this spring in place because it likes to pop out of place on this one. They're not supposed to, they're supposed to hinge up, but this one doesn't stay in place. So I was trying to use Rodico to keep it from springing away. I had noticed that it did that when I was cleaning it. Luckily, I was able to find it again. It didn't go far, and it did the same thing again. But luckily, again, it didn't go far, and I was able to find it. So here is the cleaned and oiled stone and chaton, or jewel. I'll get that put into place and get this spring back in. This is a very fiddly job here. It's nice when they just hinge up and don't fly away, but this one was not cooperating. So you have to kind of hook it over that edge right there. Once it's in place, you have to carefully get it back down without popping it back out of place. So now I'm going to hold that down with my tweezers while I get the little prongs back in their slots. Once those are in place, that stays just fine. Now I'm going to reinstall the balance and see if this thing will run. And it looks like it will run, even without the jewel on the top. That's already better than it was. Now we need to replace that jewel or oil and replace it. Looks like it's running fairly strongly too. Again, I'm trying to not slip and scratch the movement. All right, so now the same thing on this side. We need to take these pieces out. And this one doesn't fly away, it just hinges up as it's supposed to do. Almost looks like it flies away, but it doesn't. So now again, we have to put a drop of oil on the flat side of this stone. You can see that it's still a little bit dirty, so I'm going to scrape it clean on this post-it note. You can see this side is the round side. So I'm going to slide it underneath my finger and get it clean on the post-it note. You can see it's a little bit cleaner, but there's still a bit on there, so I'm going to do it again. Now it is clean. You can see it's perfectly clean and flat. So now we can add the drop of 9010 oil on that. And I needed to flip that chaton over so it's upside down. Here's the 9010. And then we put the chaton on top of it and flip that back over. Sometimes it just makes it easy. Just flipped right over on its own. Alright, so with that open, we can reintroduce the chaton and cap jewel and close these springs. This type of jewel setting is called an Inca block, and they're a lot easier to deal with than other types. Now the rest of these wheels and gears here, I'm not sure what you really call these. It's all part of the automatic winding works. And all these wheels go under one plate, so that they all have to be installed at the same time. Now these two wheels that go on the little springs, they have these jewel or gears that go on top of them, and I don't know if they're supposed to be oiled with Molykote DX like I'm doing here, but they look very similar to the kind of gears that you have in the sliding clutch and winding pinion, and they use grease like this. So I'm just guessing that they need the same kind of grease. And not only would they need the same type of grease, but they'll also hold it together as you reinstall it, so that gear won't fall off that wheel as you put it in. The grease will hold it in place. All right, now we need to get the cover, the bridge on that. And this one's another fiddly process of trying to get all the pivots in the right place. These pivots, I believe, are a little bit more stout, but you still want to be careful. And again, had to use the microscope to get up close. I think I did speed this footage up a little bit too, just to make it go a little bit quicker. With everything in place, we can now put the screws back in. Now I'm just lubricating the top pinions of all those automatic winding works, wheels and gears. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'll start on the dial side. So first I'm going to start with the sliding clutch and winding pinion. And as I was talking about earlier, these take some Molykote DX on those gears. I was adding a little bit of lubrication down where the sliding pinion goes. You want the pointed gears aimed toward the center of the watch. Sawtooth gears you want aimed toward the winding pinion. Now I'm going to reinstall the stem, and I'm putting some more Molykote DX on the stem. Now I'm going to get the stem retaining plate thing screwed into place, and you have to take the movement and hold it in place with one finger, and then turn the screw on the other side of the movement. Now with that in place, I can move on to getting the yoke in place. I think I was putting a little bit of D5 on that post, and also some more Molykote DX in the slot where the yoke goes on the sliding clutch. Now I can put the yoke back in, making sure it's aimed the correct way. Now the yoke spring can go in. And again, putting some plastic over it to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Now I can put the that plate over top of it. Next, put some Molykote DX in each slot where the time setting and winding modes are, and I move that post over to the other spot, and put a little bit of Molykote DX in that other slot, so they both have a little bit in it. Next, I add a little bit of D5 or 9010 to the bottom of that pinion where it goes into the spring that's there, and adding some D5 to these posts for the intermediate wheels. Again, making sure the bevel goes down. Some more D5 on that post. And I'm not sure what that contraption is called. It's for changing the date. And this retaining plate with that gear goes on top of that. And then I realized I forgot the cannon pinion after I attempt to put these screws in. So that has to come back off. And this one is not a friction fit cannon pinion, it just slides into place, and you have to make sure it meshes with those the gears of the teeth, or the teeth of the gears of the wheel right next to it. Once they mesh with that, then you can put the plate over top of it. Now I can put those screws in. I'm trying to be very careful not to slip. And everything seems to be working correctly. Next, the hour wheel can go on. And the date ring. And the date ring jumper. Slightly out of frame on this one. Now the date jumper spring can go in. These, I've lost several of these. They're very easy to lose. So again, with the plastic. And then its retaining plate can go over that. Took me a little bit to figure out exactly how this plate goes over it, but I got it figured out in the end. And this plate has 3 small screws that go onto it. And all of these screws, you want to be careful not to over tighten them, because you can strip them out very easily and get them completely stuck. Here my screwdriver is still slightly magnetized. Sometimes it's difficult to turn the screwdriver without too much downward pressure to get those screws started. I still managed to slip a little bit, but I don't think I scratched anything. Alright, now I'm just checking the function of the date indicator. Make sure that's working properly. It looks like it is. So now we can put this strangely shaped gear back in place. And I believe this is the day jumper. And the spring for the day jumper is on the other side of this plate. And this one again has 3 small screws. Next, I can get the day indicator wheel on there. And if you position it so the jumper is right in that window, you can pull that back and it pops into place. So now I can check the function of that. Now with that in place, we put the dial spacer ring back in place. And you have to make sure you place it so that it's at the very edge of the movement, otherwise it can be slightly angled and won't give you the space you need to on the dial side to add the hands. So you have to make sure you put that spacer ring on there properly. So once you have the dial on there, you can tighten the dial foot screws. And the first time I did this, I did not have that spacer ring placed correctly, so when I go to install the hands, they gave me a lot of trouble until I figured that out. So what you want to do is you roll through the hours until the date changes, and you want to add the hour hand right at midnight as the date changes. And then you do the same with the minutes hand. And as I was saying before, I really had a hard time because there wasn't enough space because of the positioning of that spacer dial spacer ring to get it installed properly. So this took a lot longer than it should have. And then to install the seconds hand, you just drop it in there and push it into place. Now next, I'm going to, I took the case apart and I cleaned it and I gave it a light polish. Nothing too drastic, just to give it a little bit more of a gloss. And to reinstall the crystal, I have a really small die on the bottom, and I have the right size die on the top. And if you put the case over the smaller one, and then push the crystal down with the correct size one, you can lower the circumference of that crystal and get it to pop into the retaining spot on the watch case much easier than you could with a crystal lift or something. Once it's in its groove, you can loosen the press and it will stay in place. And I had given the crystal a bit of a polish also, so it's much less scratched than it was. Next, I need to replace the old crown. This was a temporary crown I had put on there just for the time being. I got a new crown that fits a little bit more correctly than the old one. And before I install it, I put a little bit of Loctite on the end of it so it won't unwind as you're trying to wind or set the time on the watch. With the new crown installed, I can put the watch back into the case. And get the stem reinstalled. Tighten down the stem retaining screw. And then we're gonna get. We need more wood. We need more wood for a bow. We need a bow. Now I'm putting I don't know if it's necessary or not to oil that post where the rotor goes, but I'll put some D5 on there. There we go. I can grab more stuff. And apparently I'm hungry. Oh, let's eat this thing. For me. We'll feed you guys some berries. You need some berries. Berries. Get the little rotor retaining plate in place. Put a. And put its screw back in. You have to be careful with this screw so it doesn't fall onto the balance or something if you lose it. Okay, hold on, we're gonna make a bunch of this here wool and then cloth. Next, I greased up the gasket with some silicone grease. This is the original gasket. I'm not sure where I would find another one like this. And this one seemed pretty pliable, so As long as you don't take the watch diving or something, it should be fine. Now the backing plate can go on. And its retainer. And I can reinstall the bracelet. I want to thank all of you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, or maybe you learned something from it. I hope you have a good day, and God's peace.